Hey, listener, this is Josh Elledge, CEO of UpMyInfluence.com. We are actively seeking guests for our daily commercial-free entrepreneurial inspiration podcast. If you know someone who is doing 6 to 8 figures in business, send them our way. Just go to UpMyInfluence.com/guest. Let's get on with the show.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Thoughtful Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Jen Amos. And today I have with me Anna Parker Naples, who is the podcast launch expert at the Podcast Academy, at the Podcast Agency. Her website is annaparkernaples.co.uk. Anna, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here today, Jen.
Yeah, I just love speaking with other podcasters. I really feel like I could just hang out with you. And I just imagine that in these interesting times, you must have also talked to a lot of podcasters or even people aspiring to be podcasters.
For sure. And it's where some of the most connected, conscious conversations are happening.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that while the world locked down in 2020, actually podcasters connected, they developed relationships and reached people who need to hear them. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. I feel very lucky. I started podcasting in summer 2019, and I kind of failed at everything to make it happen up until when 2020 hit. I feel like I was prepared. I was prepared to maintain these relationships because of podcasting. And I really feel like if it wasn't because of this podcasting community and just doing what I do on here, it would have been hard. It would have been hard to stay connected with people and feel grounded and to, find that common ground. At least here in America, there's been a lot of divisive rhetoric in media. And so, just being able to have a conversation like this one-to-one with someone to really just try to find, like I said, that common ground is very refreshing for me. And it gives me hope in these interesting times.
For sure. And I hear that a lot of that actually people who are using podcasting as a strategy to grow their business, grow their personal brand, actually what makes them tick is the fact that you never know when you're interviewed or when you're the interviewee.
Yeah.
Is that the right way around? Whether you're the interviewer or the interviewee, you never know how that conversation is going to go.
Yeah.
And yet when you have a great conversation and you connect and you are eyeball to eyeball with somebody, then sometimes there's, sparks, there's chemistry there and a great conversation can happen. And I love that about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have some friends that were part of this group chat on social media, and there was some miscommunication, and it was really difficult because it's like, well, we can't talk about it in person. I have to read it through text, and then and it's hard to meet people in person because of the whole social distancing and all that stuff nowadays. So I feel like I feel very fortunate to be in a space where, people have to, kind of give me eye contact in the sense right now where, just being a part of a group chat, let's say on social media, there's so much miscommunication that can take place. And, everyone is responding at different times. And so you don't know, am I going to hear back from that person? And so even for myself, I've cut back my time on social media because I have just found more fulfillment through podcasting.
It's interesting from that angle.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of the amount of people I know who have gone on what I'm going to describe as a random podcast, but they've had a great conversation and they've ended up becoming friends or doing collaborations or joint ventures together. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anna, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what you do at the Podcast Agency. You help high-profile entrepreneurs get louder by launching successful chart-topping podcasts around the world. First of all, wow. and secondly, I know that the way you do that is through a consultancy process. So tell us about that. Tell us about your company and how you help these high-profile entrepreneurs.
I came into the audio world by accident about 15 years ago because I had this moment where I was told to expect I'd never walk again. And my world was crushed.
Wow.
I'd been an actor at the time. And as you're speaking to me here, Jen, you can see I'm in, for the listeners, I'm in what looks like a very professional studio. Everybody comments on how great my background looks. But it actually used to be my airing cupboard. It's where we kept the towels and the linen. But it was the only room in the house that my wheelchair fitted into.
Yeah.
And so my audio world, realizing that as an actor, I would never get back on stage, but as a voice performer in audio, I could internationally claim that stage, if you like.
Yeah.
I fell into the audio world kind of by accident. And at the same time, I encountered mindset and motivational work. And that changed my life. I fully recovered and I won awards in audio in Hollywood for audio. And I thought at that point that what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life is being a motivational speaker on the traditional stages and an author and all of those kinds of things. And what I realized was that I had a toolkit. I had knowledge about audio that other people, even in the podcast space, didn't have. They hadn't got beyond the 10,000 hours of expertise that you traditionally you need. And so I realized that instead of being the one who had to be on those stages, what I could really do is help other leaders around the world, around the globe, to get louder. And we have this unique platform that when you find it and you love it, like we were discussing, Jen, it can help you reach many, many people on an individual level. And I always think about that with podcasting, is that what we're really trying to do beyond the lead generation, beyond the relationship building, we're trying to lift, transform, motivate, inspire one person.
Yeah.
For whatever it is we're talking about. That's really why we're here. But you and I get to have a great conversation too. So I realized that I wanted to teach people how to podcast. And my journey into that was, even though I had excellence in audio, I didn't understand the podcast space 4 years ago. So I couldn't understand why with my first show, it wasn't kind of getting anywhere. So I went back to basics and learned it all. And we launched my second show, Entrepreneurs Get Visible, which is one of the top podcasts in the world. And I thought, well, if I'm going to teach people how to podcast, I want to make sure that they understand everything, that it's not just rocking up on Zoom and recording it. There's a whole process that goes on. So we created the podcast membership, and now I run the podcast agency. And we literally go into the depths of everything people do on their show. That we spend hours planning who you're reaching, how you're reaching them, what you want to say before anyone goes anywhere near a microphone.
Yeah.
And because we're clear on that, we can then build a really powerful launch strategy that speaks to the right people. And so we've had 160 clients over the last less than a year who've entered the top charts all around the world, which has just been amazing to kind of think about that ripple effect.
Yeah. Wow, Anna, so much has been said already. First and foremost, I just want to express my admiration of you, of how you had, when you found out that you couldn't walk again, or at least at that time, you didn't let that stop you from redefining what your stage was going to look like. And you did that through audio, the power of audio.
You know, and I never expected that would happen. And at the time, it was almost like, how have I found myself on this kind of slightly bizarre niche?
Yeah.
And yet now it feels very, very purposeful. And it almost makes sense that I went through what I did, because now I'm literally helping people at the top of their game, people who do understand about how you improve your relationships, your money, your businesses. I literally am helping them become #1 international chart shopping shows because of what my knowledge has been through. And that feels really meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one thing to start a podcast, as I know a lot of people have started a podcast during the pandemic podcast shows, as I think I like to call them, pandemic babies. There's a lot of things going on, the pandemic puppies, pandemic babies, pandemic podcasts, a lot of things going on in this time, publishing books, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, you don't just help people start a podcast, but you make them very successful. Like you said, you get them into the chart topping podcast shows. And you mentioned just that initial process of being really clear on their mission and their purpose. Whether you want to mention names or not, give us an example of, helping a client, a high profile entrepreneur that's like, okay, I want to make it into the top charts. How do I do that? Walk us through that process of, helping them really define their mission and their purpose.
So we've recently, in fact, just this week, we've been launching a show for Nick Pigeon, who is a multi-7-figure business owner. She's a success coach. She helps people around the world, but particularly women, to run 7-figure businesses. And she'd run a podcast about 4 or 5 years ago, but again, had done what many podcasters do, which is launch it by just putting it out there, not really telling anyone it's there, and expecting that it would do okay. And when it does okay, I'll tell people about it. There was no strategy. There was just that I'm going to rock out those episodes, but who knows?
Yeah.
Now, because we really got clear on what she stands for, who she wants to reach, how she wants to reach them, what the funnel looks like, how we're going to use this for lead generation, how it fits with her community. Actually, as an individual, in her best self, what is that core message and what's that through line going to be? So that, I mean, you will know this, Jen, you do a lot of interviews. You as the host, you need to be clear what we're doing this for. Yeah. Because otherwise it could be any show. Yeah. So, and when you've got that, you're then able to create something that's so much clearer. Yeah. And then you can look at the technical things about search engine optimization for the websites, but also for inside the podcast directories. And then you can start to build for that unique audience a really killer launch strategy. And we take care of everything. We do all the production, we do the show notes, do the search engine optimization, so that we get to a point after the initial consultancy that high level entrepreneur who's super busy literally just has to do, either 10-minute solo show or a 40-minute interview with somebody, and they don't have to think about it. And yet we're getting them up there and out there and helping them build their audience and their credibility. And it's very cool walking people through that process. I don't know if you had an equivalent when you were younger in the US, or maybe you still have it now. In the UK, we used to on a Sunday night have the UK Top 40 chart show, where the cheesy radio show, and everybody would be there with their cassette tape players waiting for that number one. I feel like I get to do that for people on a regular basis. I get to get them that top spot that is real. It's not that we fabricated it. They have got that following. They've reached that audience. Yeah. And seeing all of when you get the strategy right, when you get the show right, when you get the mission right, the love, the gratitude, the appreciation that comes back. And I think that's really important for self-validation.
Yeah, I think it's just, giving these high profile entrepreneurs permission to have conviction on their mission and purpose early on, so that, you as a team can really run with this full throttle. And, let's say the entrepreneur, like you mentioned, just shows up for the important stuff, like the 10-minute solo, speech, maybe monologue for their episode, or doing an interview. But, to be able to build fast, or to kind of slow down to speed up, in a sense, in that early process, which is extremely important, to build that mission and purpose, so that you could really just, like I said, run full throttle and really be successful. And so I'm curious to know, like, on average, or what has sort of been your breaking record for, let's say, a podcast show to, quickly make it to the top of the charts?
We can do it within 24 hours. But I prefer, it's not so much about the speed. How long can we keep you there? And actually the ripple effect of that, how much unless you are someone as huge as, for example, Joe Rogan, your show is going to naturally dip down out of the charts. But behind the scenes, post-launch, how much steady growth can we have? That's the true metric of whether your show's really working. Yeah. But for example, the show we launched this week for Nick, for example, we managed, she's charted in 40 countries around the world. And we got her to a number one position above Jenna Kutcher and Amy Porterfield, whose podcasts are in the top 0.005% of podcasts in the whole world. Wow. And so as a credibility piece, well, Nick is literally getting louder with her message. She already had a fairly well-established following. We recently launched it. We've launched many podcasts, but we recently launched one for someone who had almost no social media following. They were great at what they did. Yeah. Passionate and purposeful in what they do, but almost nothing, because that's not where their world was before COVID. Yeah. COVID has impacted businesses in all sorts of different ways. Yeah. And we also knew that her ideal client was not going to publicly share that they'd listened to and enjoyed the podcast, because it was about, her show is about helping men who are less experienced in terms of their sexual ability, who are in their 50s and 60s. That's not the kind of podcast where everyone on social
that
media
wants to share it. Like, hey, listen to this show. Look what I'm listening to today. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I hear you.
You need this. This touched me. This has changed my life. No one's going to do that.
Right.
But because we got her message right and we really connected in with who you want to reach and why, and what meaning there is, we were able then to pull together a strategy that worked for her audience, that was very bespoke. And actually, again, she, even with no audience, she charted in 28 countries around the world. She got a number 5 position, which we didn't know we could do that with a show that wasn't shareable as such. And for her, it's changed her business already just within 2 or 3 weeks, because the visibility, although it's audio, the visibility that gave her, together with the connected message that she's sending down that microphone, meant that she was really speaking to those people. And so she's gained clients, she's gained opportunities that she wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what actually makes me tick, because that person who needs to hear her message has been touched by audio.
Yeah.
And, I think many of us can pinpoint, I was listening to that audiobook or that specific podcast, and it made me realize this.
Yeah.
And so I did such and such.
That's the reality of, I think, what we're trying to do at podcasting, and, what motivational speakers are trying to accomplish. And you mentioned this at the very beginning, is to even just touch one person where they feel like you're talking directly to them. And that's what audio does. That's what podcasting does. And it's so powerful and fascinating. And I'm sure we can, get into the psychology about it and get into a whole other discussion. But in the meantime, Anna, I do have to mention the fact that you are a multi-award winning Hollywood, or you have let me say it again, you have a multi-award winning Hollywood audio background. And so because of that, I have to ask you the importance of audio. When you're working with these entrepreneurs, how important is it to get the right audio?
I'm going to let you into a secret. One of my frustrations about audio, having worked in it for a very long time, is that the techie geeks, the ones who love the audio stuff, would lead you to believe you need to spend thousands, you need to have the top microphone, you need to have the fancy cupboard. You actually don't. What you need is a space that is quiet, that sounds acoustically good, and a mic that is good enough for your budget. I'm a big believer. We're podcasting, yes, to grow our businesses, grow our credibility, lead generation, but we are podcasting to get that message out there. So my advice would always be, get started imperfectly, if that's the best way you can do it. If you have the ability to invest, get equipment and technology that you are comfortable using. Because if you personally aren't comfortable using it, there will be a barrier between you and showing up for your podcast.
Yeah.
And I think, so my second book, Podcast with Impact, I really wanted that message to come down loud and clear from someone who has audio knowledge.
Yeah.
Don't be threatened or intimidated by the fear that what you're doing isn't good enough.
Yeah.
You can always get better. You can always have higher quality microphones, higher quality audio interfaces, higher quality edits, higher quality mastered audio. But you've got to also think, what level are you playing at?
Mm-hmm.
What level are you playing at, and how do you want to come across? So I think depending on what stage you're at in your business would vary on what level of quality audio you want to bring to the table.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think it's the message, the message, like you can have the perfect audio, but if you don't have the perfect message, if you're not clear on your mission and your purpose, you just have good audio, but no one's going to resonate with it as well. They maybe initially like, oh, like they sound really, really good, but after a while, it's like, if it's not a sustainable message, then it almost defeats the purpose. So I really like, for you with your background, 15 years, award-winning Hollywood audio background, for you to say, just get started and you'll get better along the way. You could always get better equipment. You could always get better mics, but you can deal with that later. The point is to get started. And I really appreciate that.
We have a unique platform that whilst it's accelerating at a phenomenal rate, I mean, you mentioned the pandemic podcasts. To put that into context for listeners, November 2019, a huge study into podcasting was done. And at that point, there was 850,000 podcasts worldwide across every language, including every podcast that had ever been done. Mm-hmm. Skip forward 18 months, and we now have over 2.2 million podcasts. And it's growing, but so too is the listenership. The listenership it's huge. It's something like a third of the world are now listening to podcasts on a regular basis. So at least once a week. Yeah. And this is only going to grow. That's why we see Apple plowing the cash in. That's why we see Spotify and Amazon and Google Podcasts playing the game, because this isn't going anywhere. And right now, if you sit and wait in terms of getting your podcast out there because you think now is not the right time, or I've got something else, or maybe I'll do it in a couple of years, you'll have missed the window. It'll be so much harder to have that impact.
Yeah. And the reality is, Apple made the Apple Podcasts app native in iOS even just a couple of years ago. So I think maybe part of the growth has to do with the fact that people don't have to go to iTunes anymore to, find the podcast. And so this is our time. This is our time to shine. And so if you're a high profile entrepreneur looking to podcast, I think Anna's your girl.
Well, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anna, before we get going, I just want to make sure I covered all my bases here. Is there anything else you want people to know about the podcast agency?
Just that we work closely with you to hold your hand. One of the things that happened for me when my show Entrepreneurs Get Visible was launched, and we were then sort of charting, we were above Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins and all of those things. We only managed to achieve that because we understood the market. I'd done all the background. We got what was going on. But the other thing is having someone who you feel is in those trenches with you, holding your hand every step of the way through a launch. That's why you get results, because somebody else understands what's happening, and that personal emotional journey that you might feel as a result of getting louder. And even the most established, confident entrepreneurs do have a little bit of a wobble before their new podcast goes live. There's something very vulnerable about starting a new show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anna, just kudos to you and all of your accomplishments throughout the years, and now the good work that you're doing with the podcast agency. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you again.
More than welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And again, to our listeners, this is Anna Parker Naples, who is the podcast launch expert at the podcast agency. You can learn more about her and her good work at annaparkernaples.co.uk. With that said, thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll chat with you in the next episode. Tune in next time.
Thanks for listening to the Thoughtful Entrepreneur Show. If you are a thoughtful business owner or professional who would like to be on this daily program, please visit upmyinfluence.com/guest. Now, if you've got something out of this interview, would you share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. Now, if you do that, tag us with the hashtag UpMyInfluence. Each month, we scour Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We pick one winner from each platform, and you get crowned king or queen of that social media. Now, what do you win? We're going to promote you and your business to over 120,000 social media fans, totally free. Now, can you also hook us up? Now, in your podcast player right now, please give us a thumbs up or a rating and review. We promise to read it all and take action. We believe that every person has a message that can positively impact the world. Your feedback helps us fulfill that mission. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. You know why? Tomorrow, that's right, 7 days a week, you are going to be inspired and motivated to succeed. 15 minutes a day. Now, my name's Josh Elledge. Let's connect on the socials. You'll find all the stuff we're doing at upmyinfluence.com. Now, thanks for listening, and thank you for being a part of the Thoughtful Entrepreneur Movement.